Welcome to the Ray Harryhausen podcast, the show dedicated to the life, career and films of a special effects titan. Join us as we host in-depth discussions about the work, influences and legacy of this uniquely talented filmmaker. Brought to you by the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation, we will be delving into Ray's archive to bring a unique insight into his work, including exclusive audio from the man himself from our own archives. We will be joined by special guests for retrospectives, exclusive announcements and competitions. So this podcast is a must-listen for all fans of the world of Ray Harryhausen, animation and classic filmmaking.
Hello everyone and welcome to this very special Ray Harryhausen podcast, Vodcast. So it's one of our video podcasts, Vodcast, and I'm joined by collections manager Connor Heaney, Ray Harryhausen's daughter Vanessa, and our very special guests, Anthony Waye, who was the first assistant director or the first AD on Clash of the Titans, Terry Madden, who was the second AD, second assistant director on Clash of the Titans, and Keith Hamshere, who was unit stills, the official photographer on Clash of the Titans. And of course, these gents have worked on many great films in cinema, and we're going to talk about that over the course of the next hour or so. But we're here primarily to talk about Ray Harryhausen. Of course, that's with the Harryhausen Foundation. And I'll kick off with Mr. Anthony Waye, if I may, because we have a connection ourselves through the Doctor Who and the Daleks movie book from 65, 66. So thank you for that. As with that film, Doctor Who and the Daleks, speaking to you about that all these years later, Clash of the Titans, did you have any idea that it was going to be such a hot potato with the public all these years later?
No idea. No idea at all. It was like everything we always say, it was another job. And as it turned out, it was quite a good fun job, wasn't it, Terry? And Keith.
Great fun.
We had the odd drink now and again.
We worked hard and we played fairly well.
We played fairly well, yes.
And we had a lovely 10 or 11 weeks, whatever it is, going around the Mediterranean in the middle of the summer. So it was great.
Well, you make that sound lovely, but I know myself, the job of a first AD is incredibly difficult because you're the glue that holds everything together. And if anything goes wrong, people are screaming for the first AD, assuming the first AD isn't screaming at someone else. So Anthony, can you tell us how would you approach the job as first assistant director here, because an awful lot lands on your shoulders for this?
I don't know. I mean, I think you approach every film slightly differently. You have to assess, obviously, the director that you're working with. You either get on with him, or he's very good, or generally you get on. Sometimes they need some encouragement. If they're not too positive in what they're doing, you try and help them.
And this was a big budget film. This was the biggest budget Ray Harryhausen had through MGM, $15 million, and with Charles Schneer. And people who know Charles Schneer and have met him know that he's quite a tough producer. So how do you get on with him?
Well, that's another word for mean, I think. Wasn't it?
He was very careful. Well, he had to be on these productions because you couldn't go over budgets on a big special effects film, could you?
I guess not, no. No, I think we were quite lucky. If I remember, Terry and Keith, weather-wise, we didn't have too many hold-ups, did we?
No, we had no hold-ups, and we moved quite smoothly. The director was pretty confident in what he was doing, Desmond Davis, and it was a great unit, fantastic unit. Not as big as they are nowadays. I mean, nothing like they are these days. And we moved along quite efficiently.
Yeah, I think because we had quite a lot of moves on that film.
Yeah.
Countrywide, not only country to country, but also in the countries. We had quite a lot of moving around.
Yeah.
It was logistically, it was quite an operation.
Very efficiently run. Was that John Palmer in the production office?
And Grace.
And Grace Palmer, yeah.
Yeah.
So Keith, how did, as the official unit stills photographer, did you have like a brief to work to? And was this from Charles Schneer or MGM? How did that work for your essential stills work?
My main brief was to take pictures. No, I'm being facetious. When you're working on a movie like this, there's so many different facets to it, because as you know, there's all of Ray's work, which is being mapped out as we shoot. But of course, that isn't included in my stills. I have to put those in later if I can, or they're adjusted later. But anything relating to publicity, anything that will work with publicity. And the person who was in charge of publicity was Anne Tasker, who was fantastic. And there was Bill Edwards, who was in charge of MGM UK that time. And I remember quite clearly that we actually sort of put together, he mainly put together a slideshow, which was at the end of the movie to go around to show a lot of the future clients, I suppose, and theatres, just a slideshow of all the stills. But the stills are used for publicity, marketing, and anything relating to advertising the movie. So it's my job to keep that in mind in every scene and every time. So I like to try and be there. And the two gentlemen with us hopefully will back me up by saying I was there on the set in the morning until from the time the call sheet was, call time, to the time we wrapped in the evenings. The important thing is to be there.
Absolutely. And can I ask you, Keith, what format were you shooting on? Was it 35mm color film? Was it Kodak?
Mainly 35mm transparency. Transparency had the best definition. Tried to use Kodachrome whenever I could, which was well known. And shoot black and white as well. So they had a complete, when you finish, they have a complete set, both black and white and colour.
Did you hand over the negs and the transparencies to the production then? Did you keep anything yourself, or?
No, unfortunately. I've got a couple of pictures of the Kraken, which is actually on display now, probably. That might have been one of mine. I went in to see Ray when he was at Pinewood, and I shot a lot of pictures of him there because, you know, he was the kingpin of the whole shoot, really. And what he was doing was, I just sat there and watched him. It was magic. I mean, you didn't really realise how stop frame really worked. I mean, you can imagine it, but when you sit there and watch him work and everything is adjusted magically by minuscule amounts to make it flow. And I was there when he was working with the Kraken, which was just amazing. And I shot quite a few stills of him at that time in that at Pinewood. But it was magic to watch him work.
And so that beautiful photography behind Vanessa Harryhausen, that's one of your stills, Keith, is that right?
Thank you for the word beautiful.
Well, it is. And Vanessa, how do you remember that? Did you visit the location? And of course, you remember the shoot when it happened. What are your memories? Did you meet any of these gents?
I don't think I met the gentleman. If I did, I'm sorry, I don't remember. I met Maggie Smith behind scene. I missed Laurence Olivier by a day, I think. I was on the set for the scene where the chap in Medusa's cavern gets shot in the back with an arrow. And I remember that you or somebody had to retake those takes quite a lot. And this poor man had to get dried off. And I think he had to go back into this icky water where he gets this arrow in his back several times and goes face down. Eventually, I think they got what they wanted out of that scene. Then the other one was, I think it was the one where Pegasus was bolting out of his cage, but they couldn't get him to move. And Daddy said that they had to get somebody, now I don't know if this is PC to say this at live, but they had to get somebody with a rather sharp pin to move the horse to get out of that, bolt out of that cage quite quickly. But I don't know whether that's fact or it was just that Daddy just said that to me. And what was the other one? Oh, and of course, where Andromeda's tied up for the sacrifice of the Kraken. I saw that too.
And were you involved in that at all?
Unfortunately, yeah, Mummy and I were watching. It was during a lunch break. Everybody was going off for their lunch. And I don't know, I wanted to ask you guys, it wasn't any of you shooting that scene, was it? With Andromeda up at the rocks?
Yeah, in Malta.
Yeah.
It must have been us, yes.
Yeah.
Because at lunchtime, or just, I think everyone was just literally going off, Dad wanted to line up the shot, and this is what he said to me and Mummy, to line up the shot where Andromeda was with, and that's why he put me in that stance. He said, go and stand over there and pretend you're Andromeda and put your hands, and somebody locked me in the cuffs. So I had to stand there like this, but I don't know who it was. And he said it was to do with the height. And then I had to look over to where the Kraken was, and he wanted to just, he said he was just seeing about something.
I think that was on Gozo.
Ah, right.
Because I think that's where we did the Kraken appearing.
No, Tony, that was the tank in Malta.
Yes, that's it. It was the tank.
Was the tank? Was it? All right.
Yeah, it was the tank in Malta.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I know when we shot in Gozo, that's the place that has the big arch in the rock. And we had all the extras on top of the arch and all over the beach. And we were trying to get them to react to the Kraken coming out of the sea.
Yeah.
We're trying to explain that when they didn't speak English through an interpreter was a little difficult. And then also to say that Pegasus is flying over the horizon. We had a bit of confusion, I think, there.
Yeah. So was it one of you guys that took the picture of me chained up? Or was that Daddy that took that picture of a stand-in?
Well, I've taken a few pictures of people chained up, but
that
was in the evening, Terry. I suspect. I
won't admit to anything.
I suspect that probably what we did is we sent everyone to lunch and left your father there with you to set up while we got everybody lunched, I would think.
Yeah.
I actually watched the film last night. I had to pay £3.40 or something to Amazon to watch it last night. And you're right. I remember coming back after lunch and we did a shot of Andromeda tied up. I remember her getting her back and getting her into the manacles to shoot it first thing after lunch.
Yeah.
So that's probably what he was lining up.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
And were you guys there when they lost the alligator in the swamp scene?
Yes.
And do you remember the blue bottle situation too? Apparently when they cut Medusa's head off, but for the effect to make the prosthetic blood move, they put all these maggots and everything in to make the flow of that scene when the blood comes out the head.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And Daddy said that some twit had left a bucket of whatever it was and maggots, and they had all gone into flies, and you were inundated with these flies. So everybody was squirting everything because of these bloody flies.
I don't remember the flies at all. Yeah, maybe.
Did they catch the alligator in the end, or the croc in the swamp?
The alligator was at Calibus's lair, wasn't it? At Pinewood.
Yes.
And it went missing, I think, on the last day, and everybody was scared to go into the water because they had to find the alligator.
I know. It wasn't very big, if I remember rightly, but it was big enough to give you a bite.
I seem to remember that it was caught successfully.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Now, Anthony, can I ask you, and it's a question for all you gents. Desmond Davis was, of course, the director on the film, but Ray Harryhausen famously comes in to direct the key sequences. Now, you've all worked with wonderful effects people like Derek Meddings and others on other films, but Ray Harryhausen, this is his film, isn't it? He's a producer on the picture, so that puts him in a rather unusual position. What was that like, working with effectively two directors in that sense?
No, it wasn't a problem because Ray you worked with Ray. The problem with that was that you had to create fights with stuntmen. Like a stuntman was a claw on six. You had 6 legs, and you had a stuntman as a claw on each end, attacking Harryhausen. So coordinating that was quite tricky. So I think Desmond went and sat down in a chair, and Harry did all that.
So there was no tension there between sort of the director and someone
I
coming
don't think so. I don't remember anything. Do you, Keith?
No.
Or Terry?
No, I think it was all
none at all.
seamless.
I think it all went fairly smoothly.
Went well.
I think we just told Desmond to go and sit down and have a cup of tea or something. Well, you couldn't have 2 people doing the things, because Harry had, and it was Harry's knowledge that you had to work to.
Absolutely. And Anthony, you said you got some paperwork that you've kept from the time as well.
Well, the call sheet they got the call sheet I showed you there. I made some notes from my diary.
Right. Let's have a gander at your notes. Let's see what you've got.
Well, I mean, they're very sketchy, because stupidly, if I had known I was going to do a podcast 40 years' time, as I said, I'd have kept better notes. But
well, you could have written a book. I mean, between the 3 of you, you could write a book each with the wonderful films you've worked on. You've worked with Keith has worked on with Stanley Kubrick, and with John Landis on Spies Like Us. And John Landis is a great friend of the foundation, of course. Between you, you've worked on really amazing films: James Bond, Star Wars, and a couple of one of my guilty pleasures, Saturn III. That's a guilty pleasure of mine. I love Saturn III. I'm quite the aficionado on that. I'd love to write a book on that. No publisher will agree. But
I love that movie.
It's a great film. It's a great score by Elmer.
I love working on it. I love Stanley Donen, and of course John Barry, who directed it.
It's a shame. And how much of the picture? I won't go too much on a tangent, but whilst you're here, how much did John Barry shoot before he left?
Probably just under a third, I should think.
So a substantial piece of filming there. I mean, that was a big special effects film. So was Krull. You'd worked on Krull, and Krull is quite like a Harryhausen film, isn't it? It's got the Cyclops, it's got flying horses. It's from Columbia Pictures. I know Ray was a bit put out when that came out in 1984, but those films obviously are still loved. But Clash of the Titans is really loved, and as you say, Terry, you had to pay £3.50 for it through Amazon, so it's still being charged at the full price that you'd expect to pay for a first run film online. I mean, the 3 of you, have you had any thoughts about why you think the film has survived above and beyond other films from the era?
Well, I mean, the reason I paid £3.50 was because my grandchildren went into my video collection and whipped it away. So it's up in their house, and they watched it. They've watched it 3 or 4 times. They love it.
Really?
So it has this fascination to kids. I mean, also or especially me, I love the old, the original ones before that. Like, was it the one-eyed Cyclops or whatever?
Seventh
it was?
Voyage of Sinbad.
The Voyage of Sinbad. And I went to see that when I was like 10 or 11 years of age, and I was scared out of my mind when I watched it. It was they were great films. It was something totally different.
I think maybe it's because they're so real. For me, when I saw the models and then saw it on live, on so to speak, live on the screen, they really looked like they were flesh and blood. And oh my God, you sort of lived it. He had that magic, didn't he? And for you guys to be able to film that and follow that through.
No, sorry. In those days, no one had been spoilt by the internet and Netflix or anything like that. And also television wasn't quite as advanced as it is now. So people went to the cinema much more than certainly they do now. And they went to enjoy. Whereas now they seem to go, I don't know, the films don't seem to be very enjoyable.
But also today, everybody knows how films are made. In those days, people had no idea how a film was made. How do you get these skeletons fighting each other and falling off? And you know, differences in height and people and everything else. They hadn't the faintest idea how it was done.
No, that's true.
Today, these, you know, the DVD comes out and it's got the making of, and it gives away all the tricks. It tells them how it's done.
Yeah.
It does. I'm guilty.
Takes that magic away from it.
I'm guilty of revealing magician's secrets through my books. Keith, you were going to mention about the scorpion fight, and was it the rear projection problems?
I mean, just to watch it being shot for real in Spain, and it was. Then you go and watch it assembled on the big screen. It's amazing how you've got the flow of the fight of the scorpions and the sword fight, and you know, I was just sort of watching it the other day, and to see all that and to how Ray put that together and do it. I mean, when I was at Pinewood watching him work with the Kraken, he'd go through one sequence and then he'd stop and he'd roll the whole film back. And he had a Mitchell camera, which you see behind you there. And it's he would frame mark the stock. So that meant that he would go and shoot once the same sequence, but just adjust the models slightly, then have to rewind the film to the frame mark stock and to move the matte, which is an area that's blacked off of the screen of the sequence, and then shoot again. And he'd do this time and time again. And if you look at it and you just stop frame, you know, on the video now, you know, it's painstakingly amazing the amount of work that he did, you know, that went into doing just that sequence, the Kraken sequence or the Scorpion sequence.
It's interesting because Technicolor was Ray's preferred laboratory, and he knew the guys down at Technicolor, and he was getting prints done. He'd watch his rushes there and so on. This picture, I think, went to Metro Color, and I think there were some issues with the lab and with the rushes. Were you guys aware of the tension between Ray and Charles and the issues around rushes and dailies?
Not that I remember.
No. And did you see any of the rushes? Was that something you were able to sit in and watch?
I don't think we had rushes.
No, I don't think we did we? I can't remember.
I don't think they used to. Not that I remember. I mean,
I think because we were traveling around so much.
We were traveling so much. I think,
the editors had moved violas with them all the time.
That's right.
Think, you know, the just the chosen few. Well, the movie owner is just a small way of playing back the rushes, and I think that that's what they were locked into most of the time, just because it wasn't practical. There were occasions when we did see some rushes, but I certainly didn't go every day.
I know.
I certainly didn't know.
I know the background plates for the Scorpion fight. It started to rain, and that was the last day apparently on that location. And I know Ray wanted to stay and reshoot, but Charles disagreed. And there was some movements on the background plates as well. So in the final film, you can see a slight movement between the foreground models and the background, something that couldn't be corrected at the time, but could now, perhaps. Were you aware of any of those issues as they arose?
Not really, no.
I can't remember it. No.
I don't think we got involved with that sort of thing. I mean, I remember the Scorpion fight because that's one, I think, where we had a stunt man at as the end of each leg fighting Harry, and Harry had to fight, and it was quite tricky putting that together because it had a Harry had to choreograph it, so fighting it. So when he put the Scorpions in, eventually the claws were going for Harry, and he was fighting a claw or something like that. That took quite a long time to coordinate that. I remember. Quite frustrating.
Now, the three of you know each other from other films. So how were you booked for a job like this? Was it through sort of a diary service, an agency? Because it's great to have the same people working on pictures. I mean, I try with TV projects to get the same crew. I'm always the person who's at the back waiting to see if the sound recordist I want's available. And I'm always waiting for that to book that soundy or that camera operator.
I think in those days, the industry was quite small. And I think we were all probably quite well up our tree, weren't we? Yeah. And we got invited to join films, and I don't know, Keith, there weren't that many stills around at the time, were there?
No, not really. You had to be known in America. I mean, I got my job through MGM in the States. It was a very, very small English production, but very, very small. As a still photographer, to do international movies, you really had to be known in the States. And there was only really a handful of us.
Yeah. I think I probably got the job through John Palmer.
Yeah.
I knew John Palmer. I can't remember if I'd worked with him. I'd been involved with him. We were going to do a big film, a period film in Russia at one point, and that with Elizabeth Taylor, and that I think that collapsed.
That Bluebeard or something, was it that?
I think it could have been, yes. Yeah.
You knew John Palmer from the Connery picture, 5 days last summer. What was it called? The
5 Days One Summer.
5 Days One Summer. John did that, didn't he?
John Palmer, yeah, he was on that for a while.
Which was before Clash.
Was it? Yeah, the Zinnemann film. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was going to be a sequel to Clash of the Titans called Force of the Trojans, which was going to have different characters, but was going to be set in the world of Greek mythology. Were any of you guys aware of that, or had there been any kind of talk within the industry that there might be a sequel?
I don't remember it. No.
I'd heard about it through Bill Edwards at MGM, but it was just rumor, really.
It's a shame it didn't happen, because Clash of the Titans was financially incredibly successful, the most successful financial film that Ray had. And so it seems a shame that there wasn't more films to follow. He tried with other projects in the 80s, but Vanessa Harryhausen, of course, Ray's daughter, looks after the vast collection, which is the largest collection of its kind anywhere in the world outside of the Walt Disney Company in terms of animation archive. And Vanessa, did you want to tell us a bit about that as well?
About the collection.
About I mean, you look after, with Connor and me, we're like the three amigos. We look after Ray's vast collection, and we write books about his films and so on.
Yeah, really, it's just trying to archive and catalogue all the stuff, because we're finding new stuff all the time through Dad's boxes and things, and people keep asking me, well, surely by now you've been through every box, but no, because Dad had squirreled them away so much. So, like the other day, I came down and I showed Connor a picture of one of the sketches that I found in my mother's box of books. And it was a sketch of one of the Sinbad ships, a very early, I think it was for Eye of the Tiger.
Wow.
And it was just a doodle on a piece of paper, but what the hell was it doing in my mum's box? So, it's always a surprise, I guess, so it is fun and cataloguing. It's a bit daunting too, but Connor's doing a fantastic job, and we are finding lots of material, and the public are keeping Dad's memory alive, and it's fantastic.
So is it a museum you have?
No, it's sort of like a warehouse collection thing. It's just where it's stored at the moment.
But we do exhibits. We had a big exhibition at the National Gallery of Scotland. Sorry to step on your toes there, Vanessa. And we have others planned, don't we, in America? And the Oscars Museum and the George Lucas Museum. The collection regularly tours, and once they can afford the insurance, because each year the collection and the pieces in it, like Medusa and Pegasus behind me, they're the original stars of the film, and so their value is really quite substantial. But this kind of bounces me back to a question I was going to say before. Derek Meddings is the closest we have to a Ray Harryhausen in the UK, I guess, but he doesn't have a collection because his collection has been kind of dispersed around the world, which is quite sad. I mean, what are your thoughts and views on that?
Well, I suppose Derek, he was a leading, when I first came to the industry, he was a leading special effects supervisor, and he's credited for all these sort of the Thunderbirds and whatever. And quite rightly, he never perhaps got the recognition that he should have got. Besides that, and a lovely guy he was too.
He was one of the unsung heroes. I remember I worked with him on the Bonds and on Kroll, and he was just a magical person. He was a great matte artist, and many people knew that, but he painted a lot of mattes in Kral and on the bonds, on the Atlantis sequence, for example, with the ship. And also, he had an incredible personality. He was extremely friendly. And I used to go and shoot 10-8 plates for him, which he'd use as backgrounds on Kral and other movies. He's just one of those magical people, which there are a lot of in the industry.
I think probably it's sad because he didn't, you can correct me, but he didn't sort of had maybe a family that followed through on his work.
He had a couple of sons, didn't he?
Was it Mark was a son.
Went into special effects. I don't know where he is now.
No, I haven't heard of him for years.
Out of touch now, but I mean, they were in the industry. So I wonder what happened to his. He must have had some form of personal archive, no matter how small. It would be quite interesting now.
Yeah, I don't ever remember him talking about it, or I mean, I never certainly questioned him about it, but I guess on the bonds, it was retained with the bond, probably in the archive. No, I mean, maybe in the archive of the bonds as some of his work.
That's right. It is. Yes. Yes, which is wonderful that a lot of his work for the Bond is with the Bond archive. That's a great thing that exists. But it's wonderful for us that Ray kept obviously all of his models, because he grew up in the Great Depression. He knew the value of everything, and so we've kept so much. There's about 50,000 items, Vanessa? That's right, isn't it? Estimated in the collection.
Something along those lines. I mean, there's so many small objects as well, so that's probably including all that. But yeah, something along those lines.
So we're very lucky.
Did Ray get to keep the copyrights of the models, or did they belong to MGM?
Oh, right. So this is where it gets a bit interesting. So the foundation has the, for example, we've just created a range of toys. So here's the heart of the Minotaur. And with Star Race toys, these are very expensive toys that have come out, and they're like £300-400 a pop. The foundation owns the creatures, but we don't own the titles of the film. So when we license out Ray's designs, we can do that, and we can have a Pegasus and a Kraken creature, but it can't say Clash of the Titans on the box. And we've checked with the good folks down at MGM and Sony. They're fine with that. And they come to us then for bonus content, which we provide completely gratis because of the kind of symbiotic relationship we have. So anytime they need anything from us, we'll always provide it. And I recorded commentaries with Ray for his films in these last years, because surprisingly, he'd only recorded commentaries for 2. He hadn't done them for Clash and for Sinbad and everything else. And us speaking to you gents today is part of our ongoing oral history project, where it's essential for us to speak to people who witnessed Ray's work, his working practices, and of course your own work in that field, because you know you're a first person perspective for us. You're a first witness.
I love the owl. Who's got the owl? Is that still in existence?
We've got it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's four versions of the owl. So there's the mechanical one used on set. There's the stop motion one, and 2 smaller ones. One about this size and one about that size.
Oh wow!
Here he comes. Hold on 1 second.
Oh, is he flying?
What was it called? What was it called?
Bubo.
Bubo
The owl.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! A drum roll, please. Oh my goodness!
Work of art too, wasn't it?
He is. Yeah. He's such a little character. I really love him.
Yeah.
Who made him? Was he made by one of our special effects men?
Yeah.
Must have been. Yeah.
I think he was made by Dave. I can't remember his surname. Dave Special Effects is no longer with us.
I'll see if I can find it, because
his brother was a special effects man. I remember him working on it.
I think the first time we used it was in Spain, if I remember.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
We had it up on the branch, and it flapped its wings and it fell off the branch.
But he's looking really good, isn't he?
He is. He's much bigger than I remember.
Yeah, I don't remember it being that big.
I don't remember him being that big.
It was
No.
Brian Smithers, I think, was very instrumental.
Who's
Yeah.
that?
Brian Smithers.
Brian Smithers.
was
Yeah,
very-
yes, Brian was on the film, wasn't he?
yeah, but he was physical effects,
Yeah.
and he used to mastermind. He was there with Bilbo all the time when
He was with Ray a lot, wasn't he? And I think he did the creatures in the with Ray at the end of shooting. you know.
yeah.
And things have come kind of full circle, haven't they? Because this older way of photochemical special effects has now kind of re-emerged as people are now embracing stop motion animation again. People are shooting on film, and photography is back. You know, I don't think Kodak will ever be restored to the status of, I remember that going down to Hemel Hempstead when I was at film school. They used to give me free film stock. I was a Kodak sponsored student, and they would pay for my travel as well, and I'd get a lunch.
Right, Jonas.
You know, it was like the food bank for film students back in the day. But Hemel Hempstead is gone, you know, Kodak is gone. But do you feel that the wheel is turning back on these older techniques now as well, that things that are old are new again?
I think one of the things relating to film, some people have some misinformed that film has a different look than digital. Digital is now so clever, it can mimic anything. So if you think film is something special, it is to use, but you can mimic film. I remember saying to someone at ILM, wouldn't it be nice if we could have certain filters in Photoshop? And suddenly these filters would start coming in use, and everything would suddenly become much easier to use. I mean, digital now is amazing, but of course, when you see the credits on films and the number of people involved in the making of these things, I think that might be one of the other reasons why they want to go back to the old way of making things, because they were less.
I the other day I went with Peter Mullins. You remember Peter Mullins, the designer? We went to see a screening of Casablanca, 1942 black and white film on a big screen, and I tell you, it was marvelous.
Yeah,
absolutely fantastic, and you could understand the dialogue.
Yeah. But you see, that wouldn't be available now, and it's the way that you saw it if it hadn't been for the digital revolution, because all that was scanned, and that's why these old movies now are classics, and they look so good.
They look fantastic. Yeah,
I was watching, as I said last night, and it was the footprints in the sand. Remember how we had the footprints in the sand, and it was so easily done. You know, it was like air pipes underneath the sand with an imprint with the shape of a shoe, and they just sucked the air out and it dropped. Yes. So you got the imprint as they went along. And today to do that, it probably cost them about 50, 70, 80,000 pounds, you know, yes, to do a visual effects shot like that. And in those days, it was so easy. The special effects boys did it in no time.
Yeah.
Did you guys have
much? I mean, the size of the crews we had in those days was minute compared to today.
No, I think if there was 70 of us, if that, I'd be surprised.
If that. Yeah.
Today's crew, you're talking about 200 to 300 people.
No, it's credible.
You know, to go on location, it's unbelievable. You could just watch the credits in the cinema to see what comes out.
Had any of you worked? Sorry, Vanessa, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just quickly on that comment of how many people, I remember through Golden Voyage and Eye of the Tiger, all of us, including actors and the cameraman, used to eat in a huge hangar and a long trestle table, and we all used to eat together, and it didn't matter whether you're sitting with an actor or a cameraman or what, we all sat at the same table, and we all had, and it was great fun. So it's a pity that, I suppose with all those crews, you can't now, but in those days, that shows you how small the units were.
Oh, no, I mean, as Terry says, if you had 70 people, that was a big unit.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot to me.
Studios used to have dressing rooms for the artists.
Yes.
And we had a restaurant where we go and have our lunch.
Yes.
And now you go to a film studio, you have about 16 different caterers, each catering for each individual movie. and you'll have all these trailers to put the artists in, which takes up a lot of space.
Yeah.
And money.
And cost.
About the good old days.
Yes.
I know, old days are the best days.
Well, I think that's generally with life as well. I mean, we certainly had fun on films, didn't we? I mean,
absolutely.
Terry and Keith, when we worked on films, I mean, we had tough days and we had arguments, but we always had a pretty good social life.
Yeah.
But now I think that they don't get time for a social life, what I hear.
I don't even
one of the things I remember more than anything else, Tony, was one of the most important things from the first point of view, and from my point of view with the first, was, apart from getting on with the first, was that you understood why I was there. Because the most, you can make a movie without me. I don't have to be there. So I could be the first one to be,
You were always in the way, Keith.
I know, but
trying to crouch down in front of the camera, I had to kick you out of the way all the time.
And it's only because I was bigger than you, Tony, that
And Keith, were you trying to get your shots during a rehearsal or a block through? I mean, were you allowed to take shots during an actual take?
Yeah, I'd shoot during the take wherever possible. The Clash of the Titans was before someone had invented blimps for still photographers to use. Mark Jacobson invented the blimp that was commercially sold to all the stills photographers. And that was a heyday. They came in about 76, but they're few and far between. I didn't see one till a little bit later, and I had to bring it in from America. So that meant if I shot if we were outside shooting, then the chances of anyone hearing me, especially with the clash of swords and stunts going on and movement, I could be quiet enough.
Yeah, you could choose your moment.
Choose your moments to shoot. I'd also have to be very friendly with the sound people. Robin Gregory, I think, was the sound man on there. And, I'd ask him if I felt that it was going to be difficult that he might hear me. We'd have a conversation. He'd say, "Oh yes, no, that'll be all right because of so and so and so and so." So it's getting on, with all these people.
And there was also the shout of stills at the end of each shot for the actors to perhaps pretend what they were doing.
I'd hate that. I mean, I'd try so hard not to do that because it was just boring, and a lot of artists hated it.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a sensitive scene, I would go up to the artist and ask them whether they minded me being there and shoot. Ray was terrific, Ray, and all the cast and crew. I mean, the cast we had on that, when you think of Sir Laurence Olivier and Maggie Smith and, professional people, they understand that everyone has a job. So you just tiptoe around and do your job. And if you do it quietly, as quiet as you can, and you have the help of the artist and the first assistant.
Because we started off in the Olympus set on D stage at Pinewood, when we had the lot there, when we had Laurence Olivier and Maggie Smith and Ursula Andress and Claire Bloom and Jack Gwynham, and Lord Snowdon came down as well.
Yeah,
you remember, to photograph.
Yeah.
And that was quite. And at one time, I remember we were shooting that, and Charlie Chaplin came on the set to watch. Did you remember him coming in one day? It was
Don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, so quite a handful there.
One of the funny sides, one of my most memories of that was Burgess Meredith. We were on 07 stage on one of the sets with Claire Bloom, I think, and he was walking amongst the crowd, going towards the stages to the front of with all the crowd. But because he was so famous at doing Batman, and all the crowd started to react like the penguin.
Yeah, quack, quack, they said.
Yeah, as he walked down, and had everyone in total hysterics.
Well, the reason was that the film,
one side,
he'd been Penguin in the Batman film, and it'd been on television that weekend.
Yeah.
So when he came on the set, the whole crowd was saying quack quack. Yeah.
We got to tell the story of the charter, haven't we?
Really?
Got flying from
credit cards.
yes, when we flew from Malaga going to Rome.
That's right.
Got diverted to Perpignan because the engine caught fire.
It was a Viscount.
Huh?
It was a Viscount.
It was. Well, we were doing a sort of like whatever it was, east to west, a direct flight, and then all of a sudden the plane went sort of south to north. We thought there's something up here.
Yes.
And we discovered that the engine had caught fire, had broken down, the propellers stopped, and we had to go and land in Papillon in southern France.
Yeah,
in southern France. And when we arrived there,
All I remember was Terry Sharrett's eyes. And he had big round eyes. They're just bigger and bigger and bigger as he got more sort of quite frightened.
Terry Sharrett and Burgess Meredith were two of the people who wouldn't get back on the plane and
that's right.
continue. And they carried on other routes.
That's when Burgess showed his credit cards saying, I can get anywhere, go anywhere. So they went off, got a taxi or something. I think Terry Sharrett went with Burgess and they caught a train.
Yeah. That's right. I think he did.
They didn't get it. Do you remember all they gave us was a voucher to get an orange juice or something like that in the hotel?
They wouldn't serve us, would they?
No, and Burgess wanted a drink, and we had no French money. All we had was this voucher to get a glass of orange juice. And Burgess undid his wallet, and all these credit cards went. He says, "All I want is whatever he wanted." And they said, "No credit card."
And they wouldn't serve us anything. So eventually, the crew were opening their duty free and getting free soft drinks, and we were doing the mixes at the table, if I remember.
That's right. Yeah.
And can I ask you guys about second units and the third AD as well? So what was the situation with the second unit, and how did that impact the three of you in your work? And who was the third AD? And did you?
Who was the second unit?
We didn't have a second unit.
I don't remember a second unit.
Oh.
Don't remember one at all. If there had been a second unit, I'd have gone there and shot some of this stuff.
I don't remember a second unit.
Oh, right. Okay.
I have no recollection of a second unit. No.
Ray didn't normally have one. So, and none of you'd worked on a Ray Harryhausen film before. Is that, am I right to say that?
No.
And so did his reputation precede him, because you hadn't worked with him before? And this is a major MGM picture. Had you heard sort of rumblings about him and Charles Schneer?
No.
I mean, we'd all seen their movies that they made together. He was, big filmmaker, Charlie Schneer and Ray Harryhausen. These big hits. So it was absolutely.
I think so. I mean,
they always seem to have a very good relationship in front of us. Anyway, I don't remember any disagreements amongst them. Maybe behind the scenes was different.
No, I had a few disagreements with Charlie, but we eventually got him trained.
He was quite a loud New Yorker, wasn't he?
I quite liked him, actually.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
He was
a likable rogue. He was nice guy.
He was quite nice, but he needed training.
Yeah.
Well, you're in good company there. Jeremy Thomas, who was a assistant editor on The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, told me how he got in trouble for buying pencils from outside of the production and charged the receipt through. And he had to go and see Charles Schneer in his office. And he told Jeremy Thomas, yes, that Jeremy Thomas, that not to do it again and to only use pencils here from the production, because he'd already bought the pencils. So even down to the stationery, Charles Schneer kept a close eye on absolutely everything.
There was a lovely situation at Pinewood where the art department wanted a kettle, and he wouldn't allow them to buy one, so he brought one in, but it had round pin plug. So he said, if you can't use the plug, he said, return it to me.
How tight.
Yes. No, it was. But I mean, at the end of the film, I mean, although I had quite a few rows with him, he said to me that if I ever got a script together and I could, he could maybe help me to raise money to maybe direct the movie. I never
wow.
did, of course. But
Yeah.
so we obviously finished on quite good friendly terms.
Oh, that is good.
Mhm.
And did all three of you see the film in the cinema then? I know at that time all of you were working like crazy on different productions, but when did you get to see the film? Was it in the cinema or
can't
television?
remember. I have seen it on a big screen, but I can't remember if I saw it. What do they do after For Your Eyes Only? For you after Clash. Oh, I finished Clash on the Friday, and I started Elephant Man on the Monday.
Wow.
So I didn't even go back to Pinewood or see anything else. Yeah. I can't remember.
I saw it at Pinewood with Bill Edwards. I had a showing. There was a showing that he was put on for some press, and that was the first time that I saw it, which was amazing, absolutely amazing. And we were putting the slideshow together, as I said earlier. So I was in quite a lot of contact with Bill Edwards at that time.
Yeah,
So that's when I first saw it.
can't remember.
No.
Because I hardly ever, we were all pretty busy at that time, weren't we? I mean, we used to go from film to film.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I looked at your IMDb pages before I came on, or the last few days, and yes, so many films, just one after the other, which is great though, because to be popular and in demand is a great position to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, as I said earlier, it was quite a small industry, so there weren't that many of us to go around, and I did Elephant Man, and then I did Dogs of War, and then For Your Eyes Only. So you went almost from film to film.
Do each of you have a favorite sequence in the film? It doesn't have to be a special effects one, but when you watch the film, is there a scene where it brings a smile to your eye, or one you enjoy in particular?
Yes, the scorpion fight.
Really?
Mainly because that very day I had all my cameras stolen.
Oh, of course you did.
Oh,
yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, mine was the Medusa sequence. I thought that was a great sequence. It really was. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah.
They're
all magical sequences when you watch them, and you remember. I remember where I was at a particular time when something was being shot, and it's just they're all magical. They all bring back those memories of magical times and the way that Ray had.
I think every location had its and studio set had its you think of the tank in Malta and on the beach in Gozo and the amphitheater in Ostia Antica and the empty beach down in Palinuro that Charlie Schneer said it was a wonderful beach and it was deserted. We got there and it was packed.
Oh no.
And then I discovered that he hadn't been there for 16 years. and the other thing that made it fun, and he couldn't believe his eyes, there were a lot of topless ladies hanging around.
Vanessa, would you like to finish off by asking our three special gents any particular question?
No, I think I asked it earlier on about the alligator and the scene, the tape with me on the rocks and that. But I'm so glad we got to meet up at that CovCon, and I'm so thrilled to meet you there and catch up. So thank you guys so much.
Well, it's been a while to get it together. There was one other thing I noted in my diary that there was a scene where Harry Hamlin had cut off Calibos' hand. And he carried it out and he threw it onto the steps in front of Andromeda, and it bounced, and everybody collapsed.
Laughing.
Everybody fell about laughing because it was just boom, just bounced off the step.
I think it also deserves mentioning. I'd never come across before was the prosthetics with Neil McCartney.
Yeah,
I thought. Colin Arthur, the makeup man, he did an absolutely fantastic job.
Yeah,
because we had the three witches.
Amazing.
Three witches with who were blind, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in close touch with Colin, and he's a good friend of the foundation. His work is superb. He's someone else who deserves a book and a kind of a mini museum for his wonderful work with Ray on his films and on his own films as well, on Neverending Story and Conan the Barbarian and many, many others. So, and I just want to say thank you for giving up your afternoon. It's been a privilege for me, certainly, to speak to the three of you today. So thank you.
Well, it's been taken a bit to get it together,
Okay.
isn't it?
At last.
Yeah,
Well worth it.
Oh, well, happy mememories, and thank you for sharing them with everybody. It's
Yeah,
been
You're welcome.
really
Okay, Vanessa.
A lot of memories.
Thank you very much for asking us to do it. Because unless you do these things, they won't be there for other people.
No,
I know.
And I think some of these, Ray, for example, is one of the great characters in motion picture history that should always be remembered.
Thank you.
yes, I think there's so many wonderful people, and we are fortunate because we do get asked now and again. I did an interview yesterday for a film I did with Stanley Kubrick, or part of a film I did, Barry Lyndon, and he told me things that I didn't even know. And
Well, a lot of water has gone under the bridge over the years, and a lot of films in between. And you tend to, as Tony said earlier, they all blend into one. It's just another job, and you never think, "Oh, I've got to keep a record of this." I mean,
no,
you just don't. Nobody knows if a film's going to be a success or not.
This was the sad thing. It was just another job.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? I mean, you didn't say, "Oh, goody, I've got Clash of the Titans," because you didn't know what Clash of the Titans was, and until 10 years later, or 20 years later, or 40 years later. No,
But you knew it was
Sorry.
a Ray Harryhausen movie.
Yeah.
That was part of
Yeah.
it.
Oh, well, thank
Copyright in the Ray Harryhausen podcast is owned by the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation, a Scottish registered charity, number SC 001419, 2022. This recording may not be reproduced in whole or in part without written permission from the Foundation. The views expressed within these podcasts do not necessarily reflect those of the Foundation, its trustees or employees. For further terms and conditions, please contact us at rayharryhausen.com, where you can find our Facebook, Instagram and Twitter links.